What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, and the Dr. Vibe Show is a place for epic conversations. I'm also a certified empowerment coach and also president of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Conversations. I am very blessed and highly favored to have these gentlemen on the conversation tonight. Most Tuesday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a show dedicated to men. And these two gentlemen, I'll say it over and over again, have made me and continue to make me a better man. So we're going to be sharing tonight about loneliness, but we're going to have each one of our friends introduce themselves. So first off, from the Mankind Project in Chicago, we have Glenn Barker. How you doing, Glenn?
Very good. Thank you for having me on this courageous program that we're having tonight about loneliness, and especially how it affects men. Great to be with you.
And can you share with the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm the president and executive director of the Mankind Project out of Chicago. We're a 30-year-old nonprofit that grew around the world. It has more than 40 centers and 50,000 men now doing this work, 700 men's groups, mostly because men saw the need in their own areas for having a good place for growing the mature masculine in themselves and being of service to their families and their communities. And we're proud of the work we do. It's a personal growth track for men that's very compelling. It's very real for men. And we take accountability and having a mission and vision for your life very much to heart. And we support each other in the tasks that it takes and challenges and the support to grow ourselves as better men. And that tells you a little bit about us.
Excellent. And also joining us, locked in arms, is Dr. Marvin Thompson, the man who, he's all over the place. But last night, these two men were together on Dr. Thompson's show. So I've got together on my show. So, Dr. Thompson, honored to have you on the conversation. Can you share a little about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to be with you two guys again. It's like, we started together, about almost 2 years ago, and we're never going to separate from each other. I can tell you that. I am the president of the Lighthouse Education Foundation and also the CEO and president of Empower Ed, which is an education consulting firm. I'm an educator with over 25 years. They call it experience. I call it in the trenches. So my work has always been around work with young people, kids, families, and communities. And after I left the institution of education, I took all of those experiences and put them into two different organizations. So my whole mission in life is serving schools, teachers, and leaders, and also the families that they support and some of the issues that they deal with. So it's kind of like marrying the home school relationship and the work that I do in two separate entities.
Excellent. And I would be remiss if I don't tell people, make sure if you can to catch Dr. Thompson's weekly podcast called The Bullpen on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Excellent programming, required listening for those who really want to move forward when it comes to the world of education and young people. He does an outstanding job with that program.
Thank you, my friend.
Right back at you. Well, tonight, a little bit of background on the subject tonight, and it's really been on my heart for the last few weeks. And I'll just shorten the story. But a few weeks ago, I was texting back and forth a gentleman who's been a good friend of mine for about 15 years. And the last line of his text said to me, "I'll catch you tomorrow, God willing." And that sort of froze me because there's not too many times in my life that a man has told me, "God willing." So I immediately, and Glenn's a great mentor in this, I immediately called him and said, "What's going on?" And long story short, he's involved in a committed relationship. He has some children, but he said he feels all alone. And that froze me. And over the last number of weeks, I've had discussions with a number of men who I'm close with who feel lonely. And after that initial conversation, I reached out to Glenn and said, "Glenn, I need you and Dr. T to come on this platform to talk about men and loneliness, because I think it's a real big issue that we don't address a lot of the time. So we're going to talk about it tonight. And Glenn came up with a really good topic, as he always does, to frame it. And we're going to chat tonight about men, loneliness, living with our choices. And as I always do when we have these gentlemen on, I'm going to hand it over to Glenn. So Glenn, please take it over.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, listeners, for, I think this is a very courageous topic. And when Dr. Vibe asked me if I'd want to put in on this, I said yes. Loneliness, feeling of being estranged, of being removed from, or being separated. This does affect our lives. So we'll talk about this in the world of men. Loneliness can come by being disenfranchised, for the most part, from someone or something, or feeling disconnected. And I have worked with thousands of men, and many of those men do suffer loneliness. There is an isolation that men, I believe, also tend to do. That might be in our DNA, but there is an isolation factor in men, and a loneliness that sets in. So I'd like to have us dig into the causes of loneliness. And yes, like Dr. Vibe said, the choices that we make as men, and are we willing to live with those choices? Another way to look at this, I'll say, who are we when we're not in relationship with someone? I think that's very valid. If any man has ever been divorced or separated, I think there is a period of time when there's a discovery that says, who am I outside of this relationship? Dr. Thompson?
Man, Glenn, you always have an eloquent way of shaping this, and I always take a lead from Glenn because you've been working with tens of thousands of men for many years. And as I prepared for this and thought about the concept of loneliness, and Dr. Vibe, you did a live feed this afternoon promoting the show and the topic. And I was watching, and you kept asking, hey, who's listening? Chime in, let me know who you are. And I was like, I'm not saying anything because I wanted to capture it. And during that time, I did two things, Dr. Vibe and Glenn. I was listening to you and your story and the reason that we're even here tonight. And then I reflected on all of the work that Glenn does and my conversations with Glenn, particularly the one I had with Glenn last night. And here's what I walked away with and my own concept of loneliness. Loneliness is about a mission. And you all know the old adage, the loneliest person is the one in a crowd. It's not the one who's by himself. I mean, and in your example, Dr. Vibe, here's a man who's in a relationship. He's with a family, and yet he felt lonely. And it immediately reminded me, and of course, I had to out myself inwardly and reflect a little bit. And I went, okay, when am I lonely? If you're a human being, you're going to encounter the concept of loneliness. And I have learned, for me, I'm lonely when I don't have a purpose. We sometimes call it mission, or that mission isn't clear. And when it comes to partners, I think that word loneliness immediately brings people to another body, another physical being. And in some circles, my circles, we call it, my daughter even says to me all the time, Daddy, you always have to have a ride or die person. So in the concept of a relationship, for me, my mission and purpose has to align. It's always I have it. It's clearly defined. And the loneliness sometimes in my context I would encounter when I could not find if we're talking about the physical sense of a relationship, a partner who understands my purpose, my clearly defined purpose and mission, and is not willing to go along. I can feel lonely in that regard. I can feel and have felt lonely when my mission wasn't clear or I didn't have one. And it made me look for other things, and it became, quote unquote, loneliness. So in all of what I just said and what I understood from Dr. Vibe's live taping today and Glenn's work and our conversation last night, what I took away with it was the absence of something clear, something that you can grow in. And that to me embodies loneliness, because it's more than another person. I've learned, and like many people who've been in any love relationship, the minute you rely on the existence of another person to be the reason for you to exist, or to count on them for your happiness, you have given over power, your own power of who you are and who you might become, to that individual. And when that person leaves, you are just open yourself to repeating the cycle of loneliness without understanding. That's been my takeaway from my experiences with both you two men, and in the context of which I understand it.
Brilliant. Well said.
Did you say brilliant?
Yes.
Glenn?
All right, well, good. I'm dropping the mic and I'm out. I don't know what else to say. I'm done.
I think there is another aspect of loneliness that is actually, you know, the physical removal. I think Dr. Thompson has a very wonderful point to say. If you find a man who doesn't have a mission, a vision for his life that's his own, that he's in pursuit of, there is a hole. And that hole can be filled with people or drugs or pastimes. And eventually it catches up with the man. I would venture to say this man of yours, Dr. Vibe, I don't know, but I bet he's maybe in his mid-40s. I wouldn't doubt. Because that's about the time when, from 35 to 45, when a man starts to realize that his life choices have led him to the place where he's at. And to be, like Dr. Thompson says, in the middle of a crowd and still be lonely, that's a man without purpose. That's a man without purpose.
Yeah, I see that also, Glenn, young people. They will say they're by themselves. They may not use the term loneliness, but they will feel alone. They will feel as if the burden of progress, or a burden of success, or burden of growth, burden of existence is solely on them, because they don't feel like they have support systems. And that alone, when I'm dealing with young people, is probably one of the most prevalent themes that resonates within the circle, in the sphere of young men and young people in general that I work with. And again, it always comes back to them defining, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you're expecting? And I can tell you that one of the big things is they're always going through a paradigm shift. You know, these conversations require people, we always want to fix it, which is never good, because we're always coming from our place, you know. But when they begin to understand their own thinking and understand why it limits them, why their focus is so narrow, that's when they begin to feel, and we use this term, is probably the most overused, underexplained term. They become empowered. Empowerment, in the first phase of it, is understanding. And I find with whether it's young people, whether it's grown-ups, and this is why forums like this are powerful, because we're trying to convey and open the door for understanding. And understanding then moves to reflection. And when people can get to those two places, those are the moments where the platform for change actually begins. And this is why these conversations are so powerful. When people like your friend, Dr. Bob, begin not to get the answers to their question, but begin to get the right questions so they can get the right answers.
Wow. Wow.
Yes.
That's big.
I think to go
That's
to the
nice.
to the youth piece again with Dr. Thompson. I believe for youth, he's more experienced with youth than I am, but I'll put it in the realm of the absence of an Axis Monday. There's not a center that the young person can encompass themselves around. So they don't have a distance, they don't have a proximity. Usually this is an adult. So if you have a very secure adult or a set of adults in their lives that have this nice core center for themselves, the young person can engage themselves in relation to that. So there is a maybe a separate kind of want to call it diagnosis for what would cause loneliness in young people. And I think that a lot of it will be the absence or the remoteness of a true center in their lives that, one, they haven't developed yet, and two, may not be present in the home or within their sphere. And this is a rudderlessness that is a precursor to disaster.
Yeah, I agree, Glenn. Well stated.
I just want to jump in, Glenn. I want to jump in there because do we not find also many men don't have that center also?
Yeah. Yes. Very much so. And that's where, to harken back to the first things we said, and maybe this clears it up for this conversation, the Access Monday. If the man doesn't have his own center, his own sense of self, his own sense of purpose, he many times seeks something to fulfill that. Like Dr. Thompson said, being in a relationship, being a part of somebody else's cause because you don't have your own. Now, that could be a shared cause of raising your family or building a better society or a business or whatever. But many men, Dr. Bob, you are right. And that's a big part of our work that I'm in, is to give the man a sense of his own center by being around centered men and growing that peace. Yeah. We need that in our world. This is woefully absent. It is not taught. It is not modeled well. And it is rarely celebrated in our society. Strong, focused, central, powerful, compassionate men. Where are they? And why aren't we celebrating them? This is one of the programs that do.
I want to delve down deeper on this because, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, and I've become very passionate over the last few weeks about this lack of center. And also it makes me think, as we're conversing this evening, about it's not getting easier to find that center. There's so many demands being put on a man's life. It's not, one of the things I always say, it's not easy being a man, and it's not getting easier to be a man. Would you agree? I
agree. To a certain extent. I have two views on that, Dr. Vibe, Glenn. I was, in my view, and we've had many discussions about fatherhood. I think the three of us together have done at least 5 different shows on different aspects of fatherhood. And in each of those conversations, I always go back to my dad and what manhood represents. And he is the epitome of that model. And one of the reasons wasn't that he was macho. My dad did everything. He did a lot of things that would not be considered macho. This is a guy who went in and, you know, my mother never cooked, mostly because she was terrible at it. But he cooked all our dinners, right? Our dinner time was built around when is he getting home so he can cook us dinner. And my mother never lifted a finger around the house because, in his view, she had a husband and 3 boys to do that, and she didn't need to. So, but the other things about him was he was very principled. And for me, and I can say unequivocally for my brothers, even when we disagree, we are very principled in who we are. I think when we take it outside of that spectrum in the context of your statement, Dr. Vibe, which I also agree with, is difficult to be a man today, is because other people are coming into their own as groups. We're examining ourselves as a society from a historical context and how some of the issues that we live in today are played out. From whose view is it told? Is it structured by? Is it governed by? Mm-hmm. Is it leaning mm-hmm. towards? Mm-hmm. And in doing so, this is where men, I think, instead of saying it's difficult for men, this is a period of time for men, not to give up space, but to examine how they've held the space that we hold. It's not, no one's ever asked us in all of these changes to give up anything. What they've asked us to do, they may have, some may have, but that doesn't mean that we're wrong or that men have done something inherently, intentionally wrong. It just says, okay, I hear you. And this is where manhood really moves to another dimension. we now have an opportunity as men to say, how can we do it better? And I think that is a final question that we have to ask. But I think it also, if we put it in a proper context, is what makes it difficult for us, because we haven't collectively established our own code of conduct for how we're going to address these changes that we're seeing.
It's a terrific take. So what this is moving into for me is the area of loneliness, maybe a reflection of a man that is living maybe not on purpose, put it that way. He's not living on purpose. So I think that's a worthy pursuit. As a young man, let's reflect back. I know when I was a young man, what I really wanted to know was how the plumbing of the world worked. Meaning, how can I get all the pipes and all the riches and the things that I admired as things to flow my way? That was my goal. And I think that's the goal of many young men. It's basically, how do I turn the faucets on and get the plumbing to move in my direction? And then an older man will say to you, it's what you're becoming. Not so much what you do, it's what you become. And I think that's an enigma for a lot of younger men. So I just think most of this is just the absence and remoteness of having the kind of modeling. And I think there's another pressure today. And I think it's like a tribal pressure. There are such powerful influences in the world to be this, to be that, to like this or like that, to have these attitudes, to break away. And for a man really to make his own way in the world is breaking sometimes some very strong tribal or family relations, or at least ideals or values. And how dare you? And are you better than us? And so there's being ostracized. Really, I mean, walking your own way through your life is a great thing to say. To actually do it could be quite lonely. So that's another kind of plight I believe that men cave in. Another thing I'll maybe put in this area of abandoning our own leadership, say, a phrase I heard was, we like to kill the kings and then we abandon the throne. So someone who's powerful, someone who's in place, someone that's a figure of authority, not only do we want to tear them down, but we want to abdicate ourselves. We don't want to fill that place. And so there's a lot of tear down in our society these days, and some of it is rightfully so. There's plenty of things that need to be torn down. But what I see is a woeful absence of two things. Now, that's on the inner side. We can move to, like, for instance, I'm part of a very large men's community. I think there is something to say for having relations that have your needs in mind. Now, that can sound very selfish, but I think there's a place for that. If my world revolves around you and you alone, and I'm not looking to get my needs met other ways, I'll just put it plain. If I didn't have my men's groups, I would have got myself in a whole lot of trouble. And I don't know if I could have gone this far down the road if I was not with a group of men that could help me step through the things, my loneliness, my rejection, my ambition, right? My pain, and work on it on the terms that I can selfishly and truthfully work on them and not burden my relationships with them. So I don't get that sense of lowly, yes, because being your own man can be lowly. It does not have to be lonely. If you have a support network and you know what you want from your life, you have some passion around something.
And good.
Dr. T.
Well, that's the thing. Go ahead, Dr.
No, go ahead. Well, I think Glenn's dead on the money. When we talk about it's really about fulfillment. And again, Dr. Vibe, when you mentioned that this is a man with a family, he's surrounded by people, I'm going to assume that they love him and care about him. There's something he's not being fulfilled by. I didn't hear you say that they were not doing something. I didn't hear you say that he didn't value. I think lonely or loneliness embodies and encompasses a lot of feelings and emotions that until they're ferreted out, and we don't assume that his definition or anyone's definition of loneliness is the same as ours, we can actually, by responding to it, only reinforce what may not be a true perception. And this is why this discussion is so powerful, because when a person begins to make the statement, if Marvin Thompson said, you know, I'm lonely, and then you go, well, why, Marvin? And I'd say, well, you know, I don't know, right? It's just a feeling. I just feel like I'm overwhelmed. Well, that's not necessarily loneliness. That might be unfulfilled. That might be lack of purpose, as Glenn shared. It might be lack of mission, as Glenn shared. These are the reasons, and this is why this concept and this discussion is so powerful, because loneliness, or the belief or perception, and embracing that emotion without an intervention, without an understanding, can lead to a whole host of issues. So it's not just the feeling we're talking about and the state. It also happens when that state isn't addressed. What happens when it's not met, when it happens when it's not understood. And particularly, wouldn't it be awful if you find out that your perception was so wrong and that the fix was so damn easy, and you go down this long road of misery when all you had to do was clarify?
You know, Dr. Thompson points out to me once again what I think is a line to watch. You know, there's a line to watch. When you're on the side of looking for companionship and wanting the other as a companion, that's something. But if you create a sense of loneliness, that might be also a call for separation and a way of trying to get needs met as well. It doesn't feel good, right? But there are needs that may be being met. There might be something along the lines of this that says, I want to separate. I need to separate. And I can't. I'm keeping myself separate in a way. So there might be an investigation. I don't know this man, but there might be an investigation like I've had with men to say, I'm isolating, and part of me likes it, and part of me hates it. It's a setup for trying to get needs met in a way that you hear the man suffering from. Yet it's a condition of choices. Maybe we can start to move into that now. The thing is about choices that you made that you might think were imposed upon you, but actually you're a player. You are a player in your choices, the way you set them up, the way you act or don't act on things presented to you. So the outcome comes by design, your design, and then you complain about it. It's a funny thing, but maybe it's time to start talking about what kind of choices maybe we've all made that led to a condition where we are unhappy, yet we continue to make those choices. That's a pretty big topic. We can go there.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge topic, and I think it'd be interesting. I may sit with this man and say, okay, what are some of the choices that you have made to have you come to the position you're in now? Because I think one of the things that we have learned from this conversation, or I'm getting from this conversation, is some men have to take some responsibility, saying, you know what, I may be some of the cause of my loneliness.
Is connected to my choices. So let's go to the second part of this conversation. What choices do we make that can lead us to loneliness,
yes,
or anything that winds up, we say is uncomfortable, yet turns into a pattern, right? A pattern of behavior, and we're setting it up and we don't like it. So choices for loneliness, right? So if I'm withholding in my relationship, I may not know that, but if I don't want to take the risk to be vulnerable in my relationship or relationships, that's actually a choice. So I'm somewhat emotionally disconnected. Now, that might be for my reasons of fear or not wanting to take the risk or any number of things. It was not in my family to do that. So this is a learned part of defense. We're not judging this. I'm just saying, if I don't make the choice to engage with you and to become vulnerable and say what my needs are, this is a withhold. And when I withhold, I can make up a story that says, if you can't read me, you don't care. If you don't care, I don't care. Now, I'm removing myself from the emotional connection, and I don't bother to reach out because what's the point? You don't care. Truth of it is, part of that is my not wanting to take the risk to say to you, I feel lonely even though I'm in this relationship with you. I feel disconnected, and I think part of it's me. And I wonder if you'd help me, because this is not easy for me to explore this piece that says, even in relationship with you, I feel separate. This takes a lot of courage, and this takes some self-knowledge. Well, this is what we do with the men. But are you tracking me with this?
I absolutely am. And I think what you're sharing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the man has to build up some self-courage with himself. He has to do some tracking of himself before he gets to that point of saying to that other person that I'm not being fulfilled. And I know that's one of the stories that the Mankind Project does, that you help men do some self-tracking.
And it's to say it's not your fault. Now, a lot of these kind of talks are wisdom talks, and it's as if we expect the men to be so self-aware that they get this. And this might illuminate some men, but that's to me what's wonderful about men's community. If I brought this secret to my men's group to say, you know, men, I'm married, I have 2 children, got wonderful friends, but I still feel lonely. This could now be unpacked safely. Because, you know, if you say that to a partner, the partner might feel, what have I done wrong? Or why am I to blame? Or what's wrong with you? So there's many times the enmeshment in relationships are such that this is more dangerous than it is, or just to say more threatening, than to maybe go to like what I would do in the men's group. Because what if part of his loneliness was he's not getting his sexual needs met? Or in some way, right? And he doesn't want to shame her or feel bad, or maybe he's suffering from some impotence of his own. And he can't react in a way that's sexually that he can be proud of, or he's not able to take the risk to ask for what he needs, or maybe he always asks for what he needs. He's been being rejected by someone. To try to get an objective group of men that aren't there to shame and blame you, I keep leaning back to having a community of conscious, caring men that also don't buy the bullshit part of the story, right? And call out what the truth pieces are and say, what is my responsibility here? If I want to get my needs met, Dr. Vibe, I have a responsibility to be able to communicate that and own the part of me that messes it up, and owns the part of me that won't step up and start taking some steps, or quit complaining, Mr. Barker. They're going to stop listening.
You know, and I agree with that. And I'll use my own manhood journey in myself, that it took me a long time to get to that point where I could find a community of men that I could be open with and say, you know what, this is going on. I'm not sure. I have messed up. And it's not easy for a lot of men, because a lot of men are, as one of the characteristics of a man that you say, are warriors. And we're used to being warriors and just a lot of times fighting the battle with ourselves. To get to that point, and I reinforce what you're saying, the importance of a community of men where you can say you're lonely, you can say you're having a battle. It makes such a huge difference. We've got Dr. Thompson back. Good to get you back.
Yeah, I was listening. I could hear you guys.
Okay. What do you want to add onto this piece?
Well, I can't add much to what Glenn shared because he's dead on the money. It really comes down to stepping up. But, once you get what it is you want, I think a lot of times when we start looking at our conditions and we have emotions about where, really the absence of acting. It really is the absence of clarification. It's the absence of understanding. And most importantly, you can understand all you want to, but if you don't do a damn thing about it, not a damn thing's going to change.
Take your responsibility.
Yeah. So, when I hear people, young people as men shouldn't be. But by the time you reach a certain level of adulthood, you recognize, one, how committed are you to a mission if you have one? Two, if you don't, why do you not? And sometimes that is loneliness, and we'll replace that with a host of things. We'll replace that with women. We'll replace that with activities, dysfunctional things, and we'll find solace in that. But there's always going to be a level of dissatisfaction, which you cannot escape. Yeah. But ultimately, as you said, Glenn, you got to cut through the bullshit. You're just going to have to figure out. And once you say, this is what I want, this is the problem, then the next step is, what's your first step? You don't have to have the full plan. No. Just take the first step.
This is what I'm calling we hear a lot about vulnerability in men, and I think that's the ultimate goal. But I think the very first step is courage. I've been promoting this idea for some time now, and the place to have courage is someplace safe. Dr. Thompson and I were talking about it, even with young people. We always say, wouldn't it be nice if this person can, especially the boys, could express their feelings? And that's a perfect place where everyone's going to stick the knife. He makes himself vulnerable, a young person, and that vulnerability will be exploited. And so it's kind of wishful thinking, I think, and yet the best thing we can do is try to create safe spaces, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'd ask any man, I think especially the men, because I think women have a permission. In fact, they're encouraged to say what they feel. And that is not as emotionally risky for them as it is for men. Men worry about being hurt. You taking their emotional confession and stabbing them in the heart with it. This is very fearful for men. And once they've been wounded once or twice, the armor goes on layer after layer. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. So the first step to me is very much courageous. And men can do this in such a way that is, to me, such a growth, a strength piece. Be safe. First thing, find a safe place where you're not going to be shamed, blamed, and harpooned, right, for the way you feel. Then take ownership of it. Like Dr. Thompson says, that's your next step. What part of this is my responsibility? Then what's the next courageous thing I should or could do, and take a small step? Once you start owning that territory, it's like a beachhead, right? Right? It's a little beachhead, right? And you can own that responsibly. You say, you know what? I made that courage step and I didn't die. I can now own a bigger piece of real estate, right? And own it responsibly. Over time, you can find men that are very powerful and very vulnerable. And that's because you can't use their emotional vulnerability against them. They are so strong that they realize that is you being abusive and not them, and they don't tolerate it. But that takes time, courage, wonderful modeling, and taking personal responsibility. You agree, Dr. Thompson?
100%. And it is tough for men to do. You're absolutely right. The gender identity issues that we have in our country, we've been indoctrinated and engineered in certain roles that we have in our society. And we respond within those roles. And one that men has been literally denied men is the acceptability to express your emotions and your feelings. Mm-hmm. But, along with that, when you don't express it and you don't have that experience and you don't have that bandwidth, you also don't have the ability to develop a response to it when you do. So
the language isn't there yet. Yeah.
Yeah, the language isn't there, the understanding isn't there, and you can't anticipate what you will hear. So a lot of it is the stuff that you make up. If I say this, and when you do, and I think you accurately said, you have to start that out in your small circle and find those men who are out there who will accept that and understand you and know you. And that's where that begins. And once that expectation, I always call it finding your voice.
Yes.
And whatever place you're in, you have to find your voice, whether it's in your voice in sharing your problem, your voice in sharing your goals, your dreams, and your voice in response to disrespect, being marginalized, being minimized. In all facets of life, our biggest tool is communication. And your voice and conveying your mission, carrying it forward, supporting others, supporting yourself is grounded in your voice. And that voice is backed up by your distinct, clear mission and your understanding of your purpose. And that to me is how you find your own fulfillment. And that's how you find and establish your footprint and your space that you hold.
How wonderful. I'll try to I want to bolt on to what Dr. Thompson just said, because what came to mind for me, a very good piece. It says, I can't change the way the world's going to come at me. I might be able to change how I react to it. That's all we have. I may have very little influence in this world or how it comes at me, but I may have a chance at changing how I react. Right? That's the choice, and this is the only power that we maybe truly may have, is not over anybody else to influence much, but the way we react is so powerful, men. So let's get into the piece we wanted to say. Also, it's about choices. So how is it that we can find ourselves in a situation where we're lonely or we're estranged, and we say, what do you mean? That's my choice. Well, if we think about this area of how I reacted, and like Dr. Thompson said, what we like to talk about is the stories we make up. 2 parts, right? So you've reached out to be closer to somebody, and you were hurt, or you're fearing rejection. Let's do that. Fear of rejection. It doesn't even mean you've been rejected, but there's a story that you made up, right? If I do this, it's not worth the risk. It's not worth the risk is the bottom line. And so you retreat. And then what I call comes in as magical thinking. If you really love me, you would know. You could figure this out. You could read me, and somehow magically this would go away, or you would know how to react to me. So the story we make up, making a choice from our judgment rather than our data, right? And then making choices from that. Many times I find once that can be deconstructed, number one, what really happened? In our work, we call that the data. Well, I reached out my hand and it wasn't accepted. Okay, that's data. What did you start to judge for when that person did not accept your hand? Well, I judged that they didn't like me. And what's that say about you? That I'm not a likable person. You see the judgment, right? So, and how do you feel about that? That you are a person that is not likable, and that, you know what? I've never been lovable. I make up that a person is too good for me. I'm not good enough. You see how these things go? Because someone didn't accept your hand, or your advance, or read your mind. The judgments that come from little bits of data become a story, that become a feeling, that become entrenched, it becomes a behavior, and now justifies withdrawal, justifies a whole world view. And this is true of many, many things. We're just talking about loneliness. If it's going around that. Do you follow me with that? Dr. Thompson, were you able to hear some of this? I know we walk through these things all the time. What was the data? What was your judgments? How'd you feel? What's the story you're making up? Is it true? Is it true? How do you know it's true? And who would you be without that story?
I don't know if I'll hear.
Dr.
Dr.
Thompson,
Vibe, can you hear?
I hear your audio.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Well, Glenn, I agree with you, and I often come back to that. You know, I learned so much from you in regards to the work you do, and I catch myself. You use the phrase, the stories we make up.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many times I use that in my own reflections, because without the facts, I'm literally driving a belief that is not grounded in any proof or evidence whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times we say, well, the pattern, the response will be, well, I don't have any evidence. You'll hear people say, well, it's happened before, or I know it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, in those moments, you're actually creating the pattern. So, you know, that question of whether art imitates life or life imitates art, we actually, without clear evidence of some of the things we talk about, we give up ground to opportunities because we're making suppositions without any evidence. And the story we make up sometimes define and becomes so entrenched in our belief system, so evident in our behaviors, that there's nothing that we can do because we have moved into our comfort level.
Yeah.
We tend to respond and act out of what we know and what we can explain, not understand, what we can explain. And as long as I can explain it, I can understand it. Therefore, I must be right.
So powerful. Really, man, if I don't know how much time, we don't have that much time left, but if I could put anything into this conversation now, there is a risk, whether it's real or perceived, right? Whether it's a story or you've actually been rejected, if you've actually been hurt, if you still comes down to a choice. Will you risk getting hurt one more time, right? To try to get the love or the closeness or the compassion that you need. If not, that too is a choice. And it's a sad choice, but I do understand. Many times it's about fear. It's about risk. It's about, do I want to get hurt again? Do I want to look stupid again? Do I want to fail and prove that I'm no good again? This is quite real in the minds, in the hearts of us as humans. One of the biggest things. Am I good enough? It's fear that if you put me on that big stage, I'm going to embarrass myself, and I've been dreaming of this, and I don't belong there. I'm not good enough. So I can dream, but I can't act. And I tried that, and I got hurt, and yet I still dream. And though I still want, and I still desire, and now I'm starting to reject the opportunities, like Dr. Thompson says, because secretly, I'm not good enough. Secretly, if you really knew me, you'd know I was a fraud, a fake, not worthy of love. I will betray you, even though I'm accusing you of betrayal. That's about me. And you want to talk about the secret lives of men? This is what goes on behind the curtain, folks. This is what goes on behind the curtain. Now, we need to start taking ownership of that. Some of it's true. Some of it we just make up. Right? We project our pain on the rest of the world, and that justifies us not doing anything. Men, it comes down to courage. It comes down to taking a risk and building that courage muscle. And I encourage you to get with some men, like on this panel, and figure out how you can run a good men's group that'll be safe enough to not kill your dreams and not buy your bullshit. This is important, man. And I didn't get this in my life. And many men I know never did.
So, Glenn, let me ask you something. What do we do with the men that are lacking the courage? How can we help them get to that next step or to get courage in their life? Is it, we know many men like this.
Yeah,
Do
there
we
are.
just give them love from a distance? Do we give them love from a distance? Do we encourage them? What can we do with men like this who feel alone?
This is tough stuff, and I'm not going to pretend I have answers for everything. I think one thing you can do is confess to your partner. That's a courage piece. I'm saying take a stretch, not a leap. The important thing is not to leap out in the middle of dinner and say, you know what, I've been in this relationship for 10 years and I'm lonely, with the kids there and everybody else. You need support for this, but I would say to a man who's, say, living in a situation where he feels lonely, is to ask his partner if he can have a special time just to be heard. I don't want feedback. I don't necessarily need you to do anything. I would just like to have like a confession time. And I'll tell you right now, I'm scared to open up this way to you. I'm scared of what you might say. I'm scared of what you might think and what you might say to me. But I've been living in isolation. I feel lonely even in this relationship. And this is not about you. This is about me. So if you've felt me being disconnected from you, pulling back, withdrawing, and isolating, you've been right. Now, there is a thing about men that I'll say that's actually fun and many men and women don't understand. When the man starts to pull back in the relationship, kick him out for a while. Men have an enmeshment that goes on in relationships, then they start to lose themselves. Women, many times you'll grab onto the man and say, hey, wait a minute, where are you going? You're leaving me. I can feel you're leaving, right? And they grab on. No, that's the time actually to say, you know what you should do? Get your fishing pole, grab a bunch of your buddies, get out of here for 3 days. I guarantee you, this is what we do on the men's weekends. You get out for 2 or 3 days, right? The first day will be, oh boy, I'm out of here. Second day is, look, we get to be men. Third day is, I want to go home to my loved ones. 3 days, at the most a week. They'll be sick of the guys and they'll want to have their old life back. I'm telling you, men do this enmeshment thing and then they lose themselves in the relationship. Women, men understand this. Go off. Go out to the woods. Don't bathe. Don't change your clothes. Go out 3, 4, 5 days. By the time women, I guarantee you, by the time he comes home, he'll be so sick of those guys and so glad to be with you. I'd say twice a year. Kick them out. And then maybe we'll just do you soon, because then go find yourself and then come back present. Sometimes it's as simple as that. There's an enmeshment that says I'm pulling back because I'm too enmeshed. I don't know me anymore. And there's a guilt about pulling away. It doesn't mean I don't love you. That means if I don't get out of here, I'm not going to be any good to you. I'm emotionally checked out anyway. My body's here. But emotionally, I'm out. What good is that? Let's be grown-ups. Throw him out. Get out of here for a few days. No, he's not going to leave you. It's actually the best time for him to get out because he's not there anyway. Men go out 2, 3, 4 days. You want to come home. You want to have the comfort and appreciate her more. That's just on another real basic kind of level. In fact, Dr. Thompson said, you'll only get a dog. Sometimes it's actually it is quite that simple to care for something else more than you care than to be staring on yourself. So it could be quite simple. Doesn't always have to be complicated. But maybe go out to this man. Why don't you go out on a fishing expedition, right? Rough it. Go sleep in a tent. Be uncomfortable. Not do his man thing, right? 3, 4, 5 days. 3, 4, 5 days. He'll want the comfort of those loving arms again. And she'll miss him too. Yeah, he can text her twice a day and say, yeah, I'm still alive. The bears haven't eaten me yet. You know? How wonderful.
Dr. Thompson, you want to add to that?
I can't, because I'm not camping. I can tell you, Glenn and Dr. Vod, the roughest I get is playing golf with somebody else's club. That's about as rough as I'm going to try to. That's about as rough as I'm going to try to get.
But Dr. Thompson, haven't you been with somebody so much, maybe so often, that it's like, you know what? It's not that you don't love them. It's just that you're too enmeshed. You just been with them too much. I don't know. I am. I'm good with people for a certain amount of time, and I'll start checking out emotionally. It's too much. Go out, do something else, right? And then when you're with them, you really want to be with them.
Well, we all get our energy from different places, right? I know that I'm what you might call a true introvert. Most people think these are only people, introvert, extrovert, right? Myself, my ideas, and I choose to be.
Oh, we lost Dr. Thompson.
We're fighting with a bad connection, Dr. Thompson. So what we're going to do, folks, we're actually going to let Glenn finish up because we're coming at the end of an hour, and Glenn is very succinct at leaving at the bottom of the hour. So we're going to let Glenn, you give some parting words and your contact information, and we'll call it a conversation.
Absolutely. So men and the women who love them, understand that men have very deep emotions, and many of them struggle to find the words and the language for it. And when a man does, call it courage. Call it courage. And your want and need probably to maybe want to take away his pain or comfort him isn't necessarily the answer. It might be a little bit of looking him in the eye and say, that was very courageous. I'm proud of you that you told me. Thank you. That's pretty good stuff for a man, I'm telling you. And men, unless you're enjoying your isolation and your pain and you're playing victim and you're liking it because you're getting attention, if you're truly in pain, I ask you to look to other men. You can call me. I'm Glenn Barker from the Mankind Project Chicago at 312-243-6743. We have 700 men's groups up. There might be one near you. And if you want one, start a men's group in your community, in your town, in your church, in your organization. Look at mkpchicago.org on the internet. MKP Chicago's on Twitter. Glenn Barker's on Facebook. So is MKP Chicago. Connect with us. We'd be glad to work with you. Thanks for having us again there, Dr. Vibe. Bye for now.
It's always a pleasure, and I'll let you go after Dr. T gives some final words and his contact information.
Yeah, gentlemen, as always, it's good to be back with the Three Musketeers, whatever we call ourselves. But I always enjoy when we get together. Good to see both of you always. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me by email at drteducates.com, or you call directly at 803-795-760. I never call the number, so I don't know. 803-795-7660.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone who stopped by the conversation tonight, especially and most importantly, Glenn and Thompson. Thank you so much for always making the conversations better. For people who want to catch the rebroadcast, I'm going to put in my website address, and before the end of the week, you can go and see the rebroadcast of this epic conversation. As always, I'm Dr. Vibe. I'm host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. I'll put my Twitter, probably Twitter's the big contact me, Twitter, and also give you my email address quickly, because the bottom of the hour is hit us, and Glenn is going to leave, and I want to make sure we all go off together like Three Musketeers. And so you can reach me at that contact, all those contact pieces of information. As always, I'll just say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracle and your solution for someone's problem. Dr. Vibe, host of Epic Conversations, and the Dr. Vibe Show is the place for epic conversations. Everyone have a great night, and please follow these gentlemen on Twitter. They are doing epic stuff in a positive way. God bless, peace be well, and bye-bye.